Hey everybody, this is Sean from the Dukes of Dice, and today I've got a fantastic interview that Alex did with Jamey Stegmaier from Stonemaier Games. Now, right off the bat, let me give a big apology to both Jamey and Alex. This was one of the interviews that Alex did before he left on his 14-week trip, and if you've recently listened to episode 141, he is back. This is completely my fault. I completely let this slip through the cracks. I take full responsibility for that one. We really appreciate Jamey taking the time to sit down with Alex. I really appreciate Alex taking the time to sit down with Jamey. So there's a lot of interesting stuff in this interview. There's not really a whole lot time-sensitive stuff, but all the same, I do apologize for the delay in getting this one out. So have a listen to Alex and Jamey, and I'll jump in from time to time if there's something I need to kind of update.
All right, thank you so much for joining us for yet another Patreon-backed interview episode of the Dukes of Dice. And I am super stoked to be joined by Jamey Stegmaier of Stonemaier Games. Jamey, how are you doing?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for asking me to chat today.
Yeah, and at the last second, as folks have seen on the Guild, but we got a number of questions in any case, which I'll get to in a while here. But Jamey, for background purposes, give folks the quick resume.
Oh, yeah. I'm Jamey Stegmaier. I run a small publishing company in St. Louis called Stonemaier Games. I've designed 3 of our games, which are Viticulture, Euphoria, and Scythe. And we also publish another game by some other designers called Between Two Cities. And I also write a lot about Kickstarter on my blog, kickstarterlessons.com.
Yeah, pretty involved dude, Jamey is. So Jamey, I guess I want to start things off because I hadn't seen the tenets of design, the Jamey Stegmaier tenets of design. And what I think is really cool is that you guys as a company have a really solid foundation in that sense. You have the 12 design tenets, which you try and incorporate into games. You also have a good philosophy for kind of how the company is as a whole. Where did those come from? How did those come about?
They've evolved over time. Even the version that you're probably looking at online right now, I think I tweaked something on it last week. And so as I evolve as a designer and as a publisher, the things that I look for in a game, whether I'm designing or publishing it, have changed over time, and things that I've realized over time have influenced that list, especially the tenets of design. And then also the mission itself has changed over time. As of very recently, we kind of have decided to move away from funding our games on Kickstarter. And so previously, a lot of the things on that mission list were relevant to Kickstarter and crowdfunding. And now, even though we're trying to keep the principles that we used on Kickstarter with our company, the things that were relevant to Kickstarter have moved off that list.
And I'm actually interested in that point. Why move away from Kickstarter?
Yeah, there are a bunch of little reasons. The 3 big reasons that I've written about on my blog, if I remember them correctly now, are there's a lot of risk involved in the fulfillment process. I found some great fulfillment companies, but at the back of my head, and from what I experienced with the Scythe fulfillment with 2 of those companies, there's a lot of risk, especially there's not as much risk when you're shipping 100 games or 500 games. But with Scythe, we shipped 21,000 games worldwide. And if any one of those fulfillment centers had simply decided not to send those games, there's very little we could have done about it. And it would have impacted thousands of customers and hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I'm trying to mitigate risk there. I'm also really always trying to look to improve our long tail relationships with retailers and distributors. And so kind of the methods we use for that have changed over time. That's actually not one of the primary reasons. And one of the other big ones is my time. Kickstarter takes an incredible amount of time. I estimate that starting with the planning phase of Scythe and moving through all the way through the fulfillment, it took about 5 months of my time in total out of a year to run that Kickstarter campaign. And that's time that I could use elsewhere and still accomplish many of the same goals that I seek to accomplish on Kickstarter.
And what's interesting is you've been such a Kickstarter champion and someone that people really look to for crowdfunding tips and advice. And so moving away from that, is it that control that's important, or is it also that you guys have established yourself so much to this point that you don't necessarily need that as a way to go about things?
Well, control, I actually feel like I might have more control on Kickstarter than off of it. So I'm actually letting go of some of that control and handing it over to distributors and retailers. and strengthening my relationships with them. I know you and Sean what's the game store that you guys always mention in your podcast?
Empire Board Game Library.
Empire Board Game. Yeah, and I love the way that you guys are so affectionate about that place, and that it seems like a hub for you. And I want to be a part of that for all the retailers that we sell to. But the control, the control is I guess it could be part of it.
Have you guys kind of grown to the point where you have other ways of getting attention for games and other ways? I mean, are you at that point where you don't need that as a launching point?
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned attention there, because people seem to think of Kickstarter with just the funding, and the funding is a part of it, and we are at a good point where our cash flow is really healthy and should be for a while, largely thanks to Scythe and Viticulture, which have sold really, really well, that we don't need that funding. But like you said, the attention is a big part of it, like the marketing aspect, the ability to gauge demand is a big part of it. And I feel like we're at a place where we can do those things without Kickstarter. We'll find out. I mean, this is experimental. I like to try something and see if it works, and if it doesn't, then I'm not closing the door forever. But for at least our next few expansions and Charterstone, our next new game, they will not be on Kickstarter unless something drastic happens in the next few months.
What's the challenges that come with then building the relationships with retailers, distributors? What have you had to learn about that whole side of things?
Oh, so much. So dating back to about 3 or 4 years ago when Viticulture was coming out, I kind of almost viewed retailers as competitors. Like I thought, okay, I want to sell games directly to consumers because I can make more money that way, and I can therefore make more games and hopefully better games. And I saw retailers as competitors for that. And quickly I realized while technically that is true, if I'm selling games, if I'm deciding to compete with retailers, then they are competitors. But I've moved away from that idea where I don't want to compete with retailers. I want to enable them. I want to sell a lot of games through them. And I want to, for brick and mortars in particular, I want to be a part of enabling those communities that form around those game stores. And I think, and part of it is a business time decision too. Like the time it takes me to run a Kickstarter and sell 21,000 games to 18,000 backers on Kickstarter. That's 5 months of time with customer service to, tens of thousands of customers, compared to me selling the same amount of games to 10 distributors, is just an immense difference in time and effort. And by shifting away from that model where I'm selling directly to consumers, I can focus more on the other types of customer service to those consumers that I really enjoy. Because there's fun customer service where I'm answering questions and helping people and helping them learn games and have fun and get the right parts for their games if things are broken. And then there's the not fun part, which I've seen on Kickstarter, which is me answering the same question hundreds of times over and over again by messages and in public. And it's grating. And I really felt that had like a strong emotional impact on me. I know I've moved away from your question a little bit here, but
that's fine. Totally fine.
This is one of the reasons I guess I'm trying to say that I have come to really, really value what distributors and retailers do, because it makes me be a better person around the customers. And I want to be the best version of myself when I interact with customers.
That's interesting. You mentioned the sheer amount of time and investment that went into Scythe, and obviously it's been incredibly well received. I was just looking on Board Game Geek now. It's still second top trending on the hotness at this point. I mean, it's just something that has not faded. I think a lot of that's probably due to the expansion that just came out. How has Scythe changed your company, if it has? That's a great question, because it really, really has. I mentioned with Viticulture. Viticulture sells really well, and Euphoria and Between Two Cities sell pretty well. They're consistent sellers. Viticulture is the type of game that when it shows up at our warehouse, it sells out right away, and then we make a new print run, which is great. Scythe is the type of game that sells out several print runs in advance of it even arriving, which is very, very new to me. And I'm sure other publishers have had the good fortune of that happening. That has not happened with my company yet, and so it's very, very new for us to do that. It's been great for like cash flow. It's been great for people and distributors being aware of my company. At the same time, the other side of it is that I've really struggled to
have supply meet demand with Scythe. And that creates a whole host of other problems. People get frustrated if time after time they go to the game store and the game they want is never there, or it's never online when they look for it. And distributors get frustrated too when every time we have a new batch of Scythe arrive, we have to allocate it. So instead of a distributor getting the 2,000 copies they want, they get 500 or 700. And that's frustrating for them. And so that's so far the main struggle with Scythe has been to keep up with demand. And me, I try to balance that with my desire to mitigate risk and not print too much of a game that no one's going to buy. So far, that hasn't been the case with Scythe, but it's always in the back of my head that the next print run just won't sell.
The interesting position you're in is that you see things from both the business side and the artistic side, in a sense, both the making money side and also the passion that you yourself put into a project like that. Where do you go with that world? Because that's such an engaging world to be inside. I think that's what drew a lot of people into it, and it's what drew you into it. I think you've talked about this before, was the art is what drew you into this world. Where do you go from here?
So I designed the Scythe expansion back in January, February. March was the end of playtesting, I think, and then we went to production soon after that. And then I kind of set it aside for a while. Well, not really set it aside, because as soon as we finished designing that and that went to production, then Scythe was starting to be shipped around the world. And so I was still fully focused on Scythe for a while, but not like the future of Scythe. And so more recently, I've kind of been participating and listening to discussions online where people are talking about what they want the future of Scythe to be. And that has really been interesting for me as a designer to see what people want, what they want to see. And there was one post on Facebook fairly recently where someone posted a really clever expansion idea. And I could tell there were holes in it. There were things that weren't quite there, but he had actually taken the time to write the rule book. He hadn't played it yet, but he had written a rule book, which is a huge step. There's a difference between someone posting a sentence about like an idea and someone taking the hour or so to actually write out the rules. And so I corresponded with this guy, and we are kind of currently working on an expansion together. So he's just a random fan. He's not a designer, but I'm playing the designer role, and he'll be credited on the box if it actually becomes a thing. So there is an expansion for Scythe in the works.
Well, whoops. So Jamey is talking about the now revealed expansion to Scythe, the second expansion, Scythe the Wind Gambit. And this was designed by him and Kai Stark, who is the person that he references in the interview. So this is adding 2 new modules, the airships and resolutions. Basically, there are 2 more, there's a new model, a new large model like the mechs and like the characters for each of the 8 factions, each of the 7 factions. And basically, this is going to open up some different types of movement, some different types of gameplay. It looks really interesting. There is actually an article on StoneMaierGames.com, which I will post a link to in the show description. The other part of the module is resolution, and these are going to add a twist to the way each game ends. There's 8 of them in total, and you're only using 1 each game, and they're going to have an impact on the decisions you'll make throughout the game. Basically, there's going to be some way that the game ends a little bit differently. So, very excited for this. Again, apologies. This would have been nice to know, nice to have gotten out there ahead of time.
So there is an expansion for Scythe in the works. And at the same time, we also have a thing on our website called the Future Printing Request Form. And basically what it is a list of stuff that we either have never printed and have talked about online at some point, or it's stuff that we once printed and are no longer printing. And it gives people the opportunity to say, hey, I want you to make more of this stuff in a quantitative way. So it's just a survey that people can fill out and say, yeah, I want this. And there are several ideas for Scythe on there. I think the most popular one right now is that people want us to make metal versions of the mechs.
Oh, man.
And so if enough people want that, and so several ideas have already come to light, like the power dials for the Scythe expansion. That's a promo thing. The metal coins for the Scythe expansion. Those things had enough votes that I was like, okay, well, I can sell enough of these to justify a print run, so I made them. But yeah, the metal mechs, I'm intrigued to see if that continues to catch on, because I'll make them if people want them.
Oh yeah, no, you're not shy about components, that's for sure.
No. I never want to milk people for their money. And that's one of the reasons I do this. I really want enough people to really want something. I don't want to make something and then make all the completionists out there feel like they then have to buy it.
I know enough people who I think would be very happy to have that as an upgrade to it because, obviously you have the metal bars in the game already. I think it would just make sense. It makes total sense. Is there, and this is going to be a silly question, maybe, Scythe the card game, some sort of I don't want to say lighter, but kind of a more mass market version of Scythe? Is that something that's ever in the cards or even come up as a thought?
Well, I could have two answers for that.
It's a ridiculous question, to be clear.
No. I love that question. It's something that we've talked about with Viticulture, like Viticulture, the card game, even though Viticulture already has cards. But for me, as a gamer and as a designer in general, I am drawn to kind of big event games that take up a lot of space on the table and they take maybe an hour or two to play and that are. I love filler games. I love that they exist and I do use them and I play them and I enjoy them. But I'm not drawn to them as a designer or really as a gamer. Like I don't get excited about filler games. And so not that a card game has to be a filler, but I kind of like the epic scope of Scythe and I don't think we would move away from that. On the other hand, I actually was just today talking with one of my friends, Brian, over at Overworld Games. They make Good Cop, Bad Cop, and we partner with them this year to make a game called Leaders of Euphoria.
Right.
So they took the Euphoria IP and made a large group social game, the things that they specialize in and they're really good at. They made a game in that world. And so I floated the idea. I'd have to talk to Jakob about it too, because Jakob owns the world of Scythe. I just have the board game rights to it. But I floated the idea to Brian of maybe doing a large group game in the Scythe world. And if we did that, we would definitely partner with Overworld in some way to make that happen.
Very interesting. Yeah. I want to go back to the guiding principles because there were a couple that caught my eye and I thought were interesting. One of which is a focus on 2 to 6 player games, has to play with 2, has to play with at least 5. And what I think is interesting about that is so many games, especially in this strategy end of things, 2 to 4 is pretty common player count. But you like expanding the edges of that, whether it be through the Automa stuff or on the other end of it, everything is pretty much 5, if not more. Why is that 5th player so important to you?
Yeah, it's really, it's the 6th player that's appealing the most to me. Scythe, we made an exception just because it would have been considerably more expensive to make the 6th player and it didn't fit with the balance. But I really like, as a publisher, I'm drawn to games that couples can play and that, or 2 friends, any 2 people, and that larger groups can play as well. And that those games can be enjoyed in different ways throughout those player counts. And 4, I guess I kind of have found there are plenty of 2 to 4 games that I love. Like Tzolk'in is one of my favorite games of all time. It does have a 5-player expansion, but mostly it's a 2 to 4 player game, and I love it. But the way I see it is there are plenty of publishers who are making great 2 to 4 player games, and so it's one of the ways that I kind of want to. That's a branding thing almost. I want our brand to be a company that makes games that play 5 or 6 players and then play 1 or 2 players, play down to 1 or 2 players as well.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, I want to get to some guild questions because we did get some interesting ones. E-Tally had a question that when you do have free time, which I don't know how much. If you have enough time to waste to talk to me, you got to have some amount of free time. But
this is work, Alex.
This is work. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. This is a business meeting. My mistake. E-Tally was curious. When you have time to game, what games do you gravitate towards? Is there a mechanic or a designer that you really prefer?
Yeah. This was actually on my mind yesterday because I wrote out my top 10 list of 2016. I play games usually 2 to 3 times a week. I host a game night every Wednesday for 2.5 hours, and then we usually have a game day on Friday or Saturday, and we've been getting into doing one campaign game pretty much every week. And the games that I am drawn to generally are kind of what I said in my previous question, mostly event games. Games that I will almost tell people in advance, like, hey guys, I hope we can play Great Western Trail tonight, or I hope we're gonna play Clank. I hope we're gonna play Time Stories. These are some of the games on my top 10 list from this year. those are the ones that I get the most excited about. There are some shorter filler games that I really do enjoy and that I've come to value because not everyone always shows up to game night at the exact same time, and so I like those 20-minute games. But the ones that I get really excited about are those more epic event games, and generally Euro games. There aren't too many. There are some good cooperative games that wouldn't be called Euro games that I enjoy, but in general, it's the Euro games that I'm drawn to.
And looking at your list, Time Stories, the top of the heap. What was it about? So I had just played the base module. I haven't played any of the other modules. And for whatever reason, it fell flat on Sean, and I just couldn't get the play group to really go dive into this one with me as much. What is it about Time Stories that sucked you in so much?
Well, it really surprised me because I didn't expect it to. It's it has that RPG element a little bit, and it's there's some dice rolling. It doesn't necessarily fit into the rest of my list where you have all these Euro games, but I think it was the experience of it that just really captured something in me. It really captured my imagination to be, transported back in time to a speculative world. This isn't historical. This isn't actual history in any of the modules so far. But I guess the thing that has stuck with me is that I have memories of specific moments in Time Stories that feel like real memories, like I was actually there talking to a character, or that I was actually making a really interesting decision or making a really dumb decision and talking to the wrong person and something silly happens. But it's this, the way they've stuck in my memory is very unique, opposed to all these Euro games that I love, where I love feeling clever and I love making interesting decisions in them. But I can't remember, what are some of these games? I guess I can't. I've only played Great Western Trail twice, so I can remember some things. But a year from now, I'm not going to look back on a certain game of Great Western Trail and think, oh, I remember that moment when I cleverly kept this cow in my hand and not this other cow. But in Time Stories, I do. And it's just really, really stuck with me. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry you guys didn't have a great experience with the first one, but hopefully maybe you'll find a way to try out A Prophecy of Dragons, which I think is the best expansion so far.
Yeah, and to be clear, I enjoyed it actually a decent amount. It was Sean and Matthew and something there was just, you need everyone kind of on the same page with that kind of a game, I think.
Yeah, you do. You do.
So, and E-Tally was also curious about whether you've kickstarted anything recently. I know you guys as a company are moving away from it with Charterstone, but have you personally backed anything interesting of late?
Yeah, let me pull that up to see. Okay, so the last few things, it looks like I haven't backed that much this fall. I backed a game called Laser Riders from Greater Than Games. I backed a game called Wind Up War, which is made by some designers I know. I backed Leaders of Euphoria, of course. I backed Man vs. Meeple, that YouTube channel. And the latest one was a book of art called Visions of a Thousand Eyes. I love finding new artists, especially after Scythe. I love the idea of finding an artist and hopefully maybe a world that an artist has created and designing a game in that world. And so this book just seemed like a cool opportunity to find some other worlds that artists have created.
Kind of an art-first focus in some ways.
Yeah.
Interesting. Chris Schreiber had a boatload of questions, and I don't think I'll be able to get to all of them, but I'm going to try and get to at least some of them here. His first one to me was pretty interesting because when I think of Stonemaier, I tend to think of you at the forefront, but Alan Stone obviously is one half of that name as well, and he's curious, what role does Alan play with Stonemaier right now?
Yeah. So Alan plays a few very specific roles. I own most of the company, and Alan owns a little bit of the company, and he does a little bit of the work, and I work full time. So the things that we do are divided up around the amount of time that we spend and the amount of company that we own. I just met with him today. We meet once a week, and we just kind of talk about things. Sometimes we'll play test a game. He's kind of my go-to play tester for when I'm figuring out things about a game, especially early on, but even throughout the process. He is also he helps me vet game submissions, And actually, one of the things that we just talked about today is usually I'm the guy that first sees a game submission, and then I decide if it goes further. We're going to switch that to him. So he'll be the first guy to see a game submission, and then he'll send it to me and ask me what I think. He is also kind of in charge of our replacement parts team, and he handles some of those parts. So we get a lot of requests for replacement parts because we have hundreds of thousands of products out there in the open now. And so we have a team of a person in Japan, in Australia, several in Europe, one in Canada, and in the US who field all these replacement parts requests and handle them. And so he manages that team. That's it. That's all he does. But it's I highly value that he does those things because I really don't like to do those things.
Was Stegstone Games ever a consideration for a name?
You tell me. Does that sound anywhere close to good as Stonemaier?
No. Probably not. Nah, yeah. Stegastonus Games might be a little better.
Stegastonus. I kind of like that. Yeah, maybe that could be our children's line of games.
Okay, and that's actually a perfect transition. And you may have seen this one on.
I did see that one.
Yeah, and that's the question from Dr. Wicks. Dr. Wicks is curious. Would you guys consider doing children's games, and what would a Stonemaier children's game in an ideal world look like?
I would, in a way, I would say that we are open to publishing any type of game that really captures our imaginations and that we really love and that I love as much as one of my own designs. And so it is possible that could happen with a children's game. There are lighter children's games that I love. More than likely, though, if that happened, if we found a game like that, we would probably look to partner with another company that we really admire and respect and that shares similar principles, and we would partner with them to do it just because I know they could do it better. Same with party game. I think the same person asked about party games as well.
No, that was actually Chris as well. He not only asked 10 questions on he asked 10 questions on the guild, and then he threw that one on Twitter. So Chris, very persistent. I could have just asked Chris his questions, and I wouldn't have had to do any work. It would have been pretty nice. No, so he was curious, about party games, and as you're saying, that's something where you'd look to partner rather than just kind of outright do it.
Most likely, yeah. Just because I know it's not my skill set as a designer to design a children's game or a party game. And so I would want to find someone who is really good at that. And then we could maybe use some of our resources and my somewhat skills as the developer to help it a little bit. But that's why I would probably look to partner.
And what's interesting is you've kind of come close. Between Two Cities was close-ish into that range. Not party, kind of party in terms of the player count, I guess, but and not quite children's, but definitely family, I think you could say with that. So, are we, for games that you don't design, could we see Stonemaier venture more into at least the family game area?
I think we could. Between Two Cities was a bit of an experiment, and I'm so glad we have it in our product line, and we have an expansion that should be coming out in a few months for that. But it was kind of at the time when we signed it, I was specifically looking for games that I knew I would not be able to design, like a lighter family game that plays pretty quickly and is easy to learn. But we have moved. I guess we've just ended up moving a little bit away from that. So now when I get submissions, if I got a submission for Between Two Cities today, I don't know if I would accept it. I would be tempted though because I love the core mechanism. But in terms of the type of game, I don't know if it would fit what I'm looking for now.
Fair enough. And then kind of in that range, literally just a second ago, BJ from Board Game Gumbo tweeted in, curious about whether you guys would license an IP. And I think Scythe, it sounds like, was somewhat licensed, or at least you had the rights in that corner of that world or that implementation. What about kind of a more well-known IP? Is that a route you guys would look to go down? Yeah.
For the right IP. I pursued a few of them that didn't come to fruition. One was there's an author. Do you know the author Brandon Sanderson?
I don't.
He writes a series called Mistborn and a series called Stormlight. He's a popular fantasy author, and he also wrote a superhero series called The Reckoners. I tried to get those rights from him, but at the time it was tied up with like a movie, or maybe he just wasn't interested. I don't know, but I didn't get them. But another company, the company that does Stockpile. Seth Van Orden, he ended up getting those rights. And so there will be a Reckoners game. There's a children's book I loved as a child called Dinotopia. I tried to get the rights for that. And it's not just a book I loved. I think it's a fairly well-known book, beautiful, beautiful art. So I tried to get those rights, but the author wasn't interested. And then I tried to get the rights to a book series that I really loved called the Red Rising series. And also, again, it was right at the beginning of getting wrapped up in movie rights. And movie rights can be good, but they also complicate everything, and I wasn't able to get them either. So long answer short, I am interested in the right IP. The types of IPs I pick are usually things that I am personally just really passionate about and that also probably have a decent audience, but not on the level of like a Star Wars or anything like that. We don't have the money to afford that type of license.
You could always try. I don't think Fantasy Flight would be too happy about that, but I mean, you could try.
Yeah, as an example, I wouldn't actually go after Star Wars.
I'm just saying. I mean, hey, maybe someday. I don't know. Look, I'm not gonna write that off. I'm just. Has that been a frustrating experience? Because it seems like it's things that you've pursued that you're passionate about, or probably even have an idea in. Yeah. Is that frustrating to kind of get turned down like that?
Yeah, all of them were. I mean, I wouldn't have pursued it if I didn't really want it, and so it was a little bit disappointing. I don't hold it against anyone, but yeah, these are things that I was really passionate about. Red Rising in particular is something that I've talked about on my personal blog a lot. It's just a series of books that I really, really love, and I can't wait for the movies. And I'm glad to see it's done so well. But I would love to make a board game in that world. So yeah, it was a little disappointing. Maybe I'm glad we talked about this because I'll reach out to the author again and see if it's a possibility.
All right. More Chris Schreiber questions because, he had a bunch of them and a lot of them were really good. So he was curious about podcasts. And from a publisher's perspective, you actually have a whole article, not on podcasts specifically, but on game reviews and on asking for review copies and recommendations to especially new reviewers. Yeah. Where do podcasts fit into that mix for you guys as a company? This is probably a selfish question too, in a way.
Well, I would say a lot of the concepts in that entry, which are largely about like, if you are a brand new reviewer, don't come to me asking for a review copy. And that sounds kind of negative. The post is written in a very positive way. Like you can do this, you can grow, but use the games that you have or the games you have access to and do reviews of them for a while. Build up an audience. Show me that you're actually going to do this for a while, and then I'll be interested in it. And podcasts apply to that just like any other art. The tough thing, or any other medium, the tough thing with podcasts, though, is it's unlike like I can look at someone's blog and see the Alexa ranking for it, or I can look at someone's blog on Board Game Geek and see the number of thumbs that they get per entry and things like that. They're quantitative measures. It's a lot harder to do that with podcasts. I'm sure you guys have some sort of data that you use.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. Downloads.
So do you guys know your listeners per episode?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sean keeps track of that one pretty consistently. I can tell you that, for instance, during the holidays, it tends to go down. And other times a year, for whatever reason, there are huge spikes in episodes. And it's not always tied to whether they're well shared or not. Sometimes it's tied to a very specific thing on them. But yeah, it definitely fluctuates, but it's something we keep track of. That's for sure.
I would say the key with a podcast, and I've kind of learned this through some anecdotal evidence. Like if you are a podcaster going to a publisher asking for a review copy, keep in mind and kind of almost remind the publisher that engagement on podcasts can, like the connection to a podcaster can also often be a lot stronger than a blog or even a YouTube channel. Like you've seen this in your guild, how enthusiastic people are about your podcast. And that's a highlight that engagement is there. So like if you have 500 listeners, that can be a lot more powerful than like 5,000 views on a YouTube channel in a way, because that engagement can be so much higher. So that's something to highlight. And the other thing I would say to highlight is whatever data you have about your listeners or your guild members or any data you have, share that with a publisher when you reach out to them. Because with a podcast, that's really hard for us to actually see how popular you are unless we're already actively engaged with that podcast.
Yeah.
I would give you guys review copies anytime, because I love your podcast and I know you're very successful. You guys I don't think you've ever asked for a review copy, but I would be glad to give you one.
Well, part of it is because you've been on Kickstarter, and yeah. I think we tend to have backed, and I say that's the ducal we. In other words, Sean for the most part, because Sean is much more of a voracious Kickstarter backer and buyer of things in general. But yeah, I think it's mainly because we've just bought all of your stuff, so there's not much of a need. Maybe between two cities. No, I think even that we backed on Kickstarter. Right? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I think it's just the nature of how you've done it. So okay, I don't know. We may do that in the future. Probably will. Any case. But no, I was actually curious in terms of. I think he was curious in terms of the broader picture, and the follow up to that he had was asking about what do you get out of podcasts, and how do you prioritize listening to them? That's not asking you to plug the Dukes here. I don't necessarily need that. But he's curious how you personally consume that media and how it kind of fits into how you do your job.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I love that question. Because I consume a lot of board game media, partially because I know that I can't play every game. And so it informs me as a designer, and because I just love listening to people talk about games, especially people that I enjoy listening to. Podcasts are a big part of that. And the main ways that I listen to podcasts, I usually have like 3 or 4 tabs open in my Chrome browser with podcasts that I either am about to listen to or are currently listening to. I work from home, and so I work in silence when I'm like actually thinking or writing. But because I'm at home, I'm also doing things like brushing my teeth or working out or doing all sorts of things that I use that time to listen to podcasts in like little 5-minute or 10-minute increments. When I'm putting together a prototype, like when I'm actually like cutting cards and doing all that, that's prime podcast time. And also, like, I just drove home to Virginia for the holidays, and it's a 13-hour drive, and I listened to podcasts almost nonstop. So I think I listened to one of your episodes on the way there, and then another one, because you guys are so consistent, I listened to another one on the way home. Yeah, but that's pretty rare because I work from home, so I don't have to drive. I'm not in the car very often.
You don't have to butter me up, Jamey. Come on.
I don't know. I'm not saying it to flatter you. It's just you guys. It genuinely is one of the podcasts that I listen to as soon as you put out a new episode. I really enjoy it, and I'm curious to see how things change when you're not there for a few months.
Sean here again. Awkward. Alex is already back. Just thought I'd throw that in there.
Yeah, no, it's Sean has a very elaborate guest hosting plan, which when this interview episode drops, he'll be a few episodes in, so we'll have seen. It may be a total failure, and Sean may have already quit podcasting at this point. We may be talking into the void. I don't know. Any number of things is certainly possible. Right. All right, last one of the Chris Schreiber questions I'm going to ask, and there are a ton of really good ones, and this is dealing with, he was curious about why not do a booth at Gen Con or Origins?
Well, so at Gen Con, the pattern that we've fallen into is that we have a conference room in one of the hotels that are directly attached to it. Did you guys come by there?
We didn't make it to Gen Con.
You didn't make it to Gen Con? Okay, well then you wouldn't have.
We're not that big time, come on. No, we tend to go to BGG Con and Dice Tower Con.
Okay.
Tend to be the two, so.
It's a conference room that's, the thing that I remember about it, that I think about it, is that it's 3 of the walls are huge glass windows that let in the light of day, which I love, and that it makes me just happy to be there because I'm in sunlight, whereas everyone else at the convention is down in a well-lit dungeon, basically. Or also there's a literal dungeon at Gen Con.
Right. Yeah, I've heard about that.
Yeah. Which is fine, but I love that natural light. I love that it's a little bit out of the way, that it's not in the crazy hubbub of the exhibition hall. I'm an introvert, and it's already exhausting enough for me to go to a convention. If I was in the middle of that exhibit hall, I don't know how I would do it. I don't think I could do it. So part of that's a personal reason, but it also just feels like a good fit for Stonemaier. It's more personal. It's calmer. It's pretty peaceful. Up in our little space. But at the same time, I do like to sell things and make money. And so I like this past year, I partnered with Isaac at Cephalofair Games, and he didn't have Gloomhaven yet. And so I asked him if he would sell Scythe so he can make some money and I can make some money. So he sold 1,000 copies of Scythe for me at Gen Con. And then this coming year, I'm probably going to partner with Meeple Source and work with them. So they'll sell some of our stuff as a retailer through their booth. Hopefully Charterstone if it's released at that point.
I swear I'm getting to Charterstone, and I know there are probably a lot of angry listeners at this point because I've tap danced around it for about 38 minutes now, but I'm going to keep doing it for a little longer because there was some part about that answer there that struck me because I identify this with I identify with this totally in that while I was a broadcaster and while I do the podcast, I definitely consider myself an introvert in terms of where I derive energy and how I go about things.
Yeah.
How has that been for you getting as much attention as you've gotten? Obviously, it sounds like it makes cons a little bit tricky, at least in terms of the way most people do cons. How has it made your kind of voyage in the game business trickier or not trickier? I'm sure there's been some benefits, and I'm sure there've been some drawbacks on that front.
Yeah, I mean, there really has. I love one thing I've found is that I love gaming as a social construct as an introvert because it's kind of this confined space, the magic circle idea where it's a very invigorating environment for an introvert who wants to interact with other people. The things that really exhaust me and that get to me are kind of like the happy hour feel of being in a room where I don't really feel like I know anybody, but I have to talk to people. That to me is exhausting and sometimes even debilitating. It can be very, very difficult. And so it's nice at conventions, I found, that people come up to me and say hi. That them coming to me and saying something really goes a long way for me because it's really hard for me to go up to someone who I don't know and start talking to them. I kind of always generally assume that they don't want to talk to me, that they're already interested in the conversation they're having, or that they're about to talk to somebody else. And so it has been kind of nice as my company has grown and more people have gotten to know who I am, that people feel comfortable coming up to me. And if anyone listening to this ever thinks that I don't want to talk to you, and maybe somehow I'm conveying that is not the case at all. I would love for you to come up to me and say hi, because that's very energizing for me if someone does that. Do you relate to? I know there are different types of introverts, so I don't.
The exact same thing. Yeah. No. What you described absolutely speaks to me in that. Yeah. If someone comes up to me and has a conversation, I'll engage, and if I know someone, I can be more energetic, more open. Yeah. But in terms of approaching someone and initiating a conversation, it can definitely be tougher for me. And certainly before my first convention ever, I was fairly nervous, and it was actually Suzanne, Duke Suzanne, as we like to know her, who came to my rescue there because she was there with the connections. She was there with me and has become a great friend in that way. But that was what helped get me through that experience. So especially the first convention, I absolutely identify with what you're talking about. It's one of those where when people come up and talk to me, that's great.
Yeah.
But if I'm kind of on the outside, I'm just going to kind of stand there awkwardly. I'm not going to necessarily poke my head in. I'm going to kind of find other ways. And yeah, it can be tricky at times because it seems in contrast to kind of both of what we do in a way. So it is a weird thing, but I also can imagine it's served you well in a way, and that it gives you space to focus and you're okay working independently. And I've found that helps me too. Yeah, I think we're pretty similar on that front. That's pretty cool.
Well, and one surprised me there, Alex, and I'm curious if you've experienced this at BGG-Con in particular, is there's a convention in St. Louis that I love called Geekway. And it's a lot smaller. It's mainly just people sitting around playing games. And I was very worried as an introvert the first time I went to Geekway because I didn't feel like I knew anybody. But at Geekway, people just, like if you walk by tables of people playing games or about to play games, people will actively invite you to join them. And if you're sitting down to play a game, people will actively come up and say, hey, I love that game, or can I teach you that game, or can I play this game? There's something about that environment that is very approachable for everybody. And I've heard that BGG-Con is kind of a bigger Geekway. Have you experienced that at BGG?
Yeah, and I would say actually I experienced it even more acutely at something like Dice Tower Con.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Dice Tower Con even more so, and that's a smaller convention, and I don't know how it compares size-wise to Geekway. So I
1,500 people.
Okay, yeah, they're pretty comparable size. So yeah, I think the smaller size of Dice Tower Con, I felt that more. I felt that yeah, what you're talking about being kind of invited in a lot of situations, and oh man, that looks really cool, and let me teach. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I certainly there was some of that at BGG Con, but less of it. And I can tell you at cons in a lot of cases, this is a little divergent from what you're talking about. At least at BGG Con, I felt the need a couple of times to just kind of go find a quiet space for a bit.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, I do that in the bathroom usually. I'll take a break in a stall for a little.
Yeah,
that's weird to say, but yeah, because there's no one else is coming in there.
Jamey, I 100% identify. Pretty cool. All right, excellent. And I've absolutely done that too. That same thing. Yeah. All right, Introverts Anonymous. You've been listening to for the last half hour apparently. Anyway, all right, I have stalled long enough. The people want Charterstone. That was what a lot of the questions were about. So let's get into it. Broadly speaking, we've mentioned it a couple of times on here. But for folks who don't know, what is Charterstone?
Charterstone is a village building legacy game designed by me. And it is for 1 to 6 players. And it's being released sometime in 2017.
Okay. Earlier rather than later, later rather than earlier?
Well, I know not earlier because it hasn't gone to production yet.
Okay.
My hopes are for Gen Con. Gen Con's in August this year. So I'm hoping for that. But it's a legacy game. And as I learned from Rob Davio and his work on Seafall, it'll be ready when it's ready. And so my hopes are very much for 2017, mid 2017 in particular. But if the game isn't ready, I'm not going to release it until it is ready.
So I just had a conversation with Mike Fitzgerald, and his biggest advice on legacy games was don't do them, was don't design them because they are very, very, very difficult. And pretty much Rob Davio has obviously blood, sweat, and tears on his worlds. Yeah. What have you found in the experience of designing Charterstone?
It's been a wonderful design challenge that I probably won't do again.
Interesting.
So kind of similar to Mike there. Like I remember when I announced Charterstone, and I think that some people were like, "Oh yeah, there's Stonemaier just jumping on the legacy bandwagon," and I can assure people that there is no bandwagon for legacy designers. It's an immense task. It's incredibly difficult. It takes a ton of time. It's difficult to play test because it's a game about not knowing everything, and you, the designer, know everything. And so it's really hard for me to play test it. But it has presented some, I don't know, it's been interesting to do. And I've enjoyed it. I can't wait for people to play it, but I wouldn't do it again. I think if I did anything close to it in the future, it would be a campaign game. It would not be a legacy game.
So how does this one play? And I ask that one cautiously, if only because in hearing how Scythe was described as being played, I had not that much interest in it, to be honest, and it ended up being my favorite game of the year. So describe it as best you can, I guess, but what is it about this that has you excited and excited for people to try it?
Well, let me preface this by saying that when you open the box of Charterstone, people will see a little note that says, read this note and then don't look at anything else until your group has convened to actually play the game. The reason for that is that the experience of Charterstone is that you are with these people, you're traveling to a new land and you're starting a village there. And so even the act of opening the board is meant to be a shared experience with those people. That said, I understand that people will want some details. Some people will want some details about Charterstone before opening the game. And so basically everything I talk about with Charterstone will be a very minor spoiler. I will not give away the big spoilers, obviously.
Okay.
So the easy answer to that I think most people will relate to is in Lords of Waterdeep, one of the things you can do is build buildings, and those buildings act as new action spaces that anyone can use. That is what Charterstone is. When you're basically building buildings in a village, and a specific part of the village that is your charter, but anyone in the village can move their character meeple onto those action spaces, those buildings that you've constructed, and they can use them just as you can use them as well when you move a character there. So that's the overall construct of the game. You're building these action spaces and then you're using them to do things.
How heavily does story factor in?
Yeah, so there is a campaign element to the game that is driven by it's driven by a story, but it also is the story itself is impacted by the choices players make from game to game, not just in like the buildings that you're building, but at the end of every game, players will be given a choice that will impact either the story or the mechanisms of the game or both. And those are permanent changes for the rest of the game, and they kind of set a unique path for your village. And that story, that campaign will last. Right now, it's going to last 12 games. That might change, but right now it's 12 games. And then after that, even though the story is over and you probably unlocked many of the things in the box, not everything, but many of the things, you can still play Charterstone as just a worker placement game. It continues to exist as a fully functional worker placement game after that.
Interesting. And that almost seems reminiscent of what Mike's seeking to do, in that you'll have not a disposable game in the sense that obviously it'll change their components. I thought the funniest thing in reading some of the comments is people are giving you a lot of guff about stickers.
Yeah.
Not a fan of the stickers on the game, in games in general, and legacy games. But the idea being that it's not an act of destruction with this one so much as it is building a unique game there that can still be played even once the campaign's done.
Right. And the thematic idea behind that is when you build if like in real life, if you built a building in a village and you went away for a month, when you come back, this being like come back to a new game, come back to the village for another time, the building is still going to be there. You're not going to wipe everything away and play again. And so Charterstone is kind of a slow process of building maybe one building per game per player. And then it's just always there. That's why it's a sticker. It's just there from now on. You're not destroying it. It wouldn't make thematic sense for these to be tiles or something like that you could remove.
And so I'll ask about stickers as the components focused guy that you are. Has that been a challenge to kind of figure out the best way to do this? Because it does seem stickers do rub some folks the wrong way.
Yeah, and I get that. I think for some people who haven't tried legacy games, they don't even really know. And even for me, like before I tried Brist Legacy, I was very hesitant to the idea. It was just so new that I didn't know. So for those people, I hope they try a legacy game. I hope they put a sticker on a game and realize and see how it feels, because it's either going to feel really good and unique or they're not going to like it. But they won't really know that until they put the sticker on the game. And then there are a bunch of people who have tried legacy games or who haven't tried them and just are absolutely against them. And that's fine too. Charterstone just isn't for them, and I'm not going to try to sell it to them. And I'm in the comments on Board Game Geek when they ask me why I can't make a different version. There are just so many. I'll tell them to play Lords of Waterdeep. Just play like there are other or Kalis. There are other games where you're building buildings that other players can use as actions. Charterstone doesn't. It isn't that game, and I'm not going to try to sell it to people who don't want to play it. But I hope there will be an audience of people who are excited about this idea of building a village with their friends.
I think there will be. All right, John Giblin was curious about the solo end of this. Is this going to be kind of a similar Automa system?
Yeah. Morton Monrad Peterson is our Automa specialist. Charterstone kind of already has, even before Automa will become a part of it, Charterstone has a built-in element where if you're only playing with, say, 3 players, that means that there are 3 other charters in the game that are inactive. They're inactive charters. And so the game has a mechanism where it will build buildings in those inactive charters so that they continue to grow with the rest of the village. But there will also be an Automa system for one player, or different other player counts can use the Automa player if they want. That will just kind of simulate a worker meeple moving around the board. It'll be a pretty simple Automa system because there's just so many different branches in Charterstone that you can take depending on how many players you have, the decisions you make, the buildings you build, that I think it would be impossible to have a fully intelligent Automa system in this case. But there will be kind of something just to simulate that there is a worker moving around blocking actions from you.
Before I let you go here, I've taken up enough of your time, work time though, which is good. Any other scoops, things coming down the pipe from Stonemaier, either announced, not announced? I'm always going to try I still have a little journalist in me.
Well, you got a scoop earlier with the side expansion.
All right.
So that's a scoop. We did So we had our submissions closed for a few months, and there were some games that we saw at Gen Con that I gave. There are a few that I was like, I like this game, but I would suggest you try these things and then send it to me at a future time. So during this period where submissions weren't applicable, I did get one of those games from Gen Con. I got the latest version of it, and Alan and I just loved it. It still needs some work, but it really blew us away how it had evolved since Gen Con, and we just had a blast with it. So we have kind of unofficially signed a new game. I can't really tell you much about it yet because I think the game will continue to evolve, but it involves birds. It's a bird,
okay,
bird themed game.
Okay.
And
did you pick up the license to Angry Birds?
No, not Angry Birds. That would be a fun one though, but very different than that. Very kind of an Audubon feel to birds, and I'm looking forward to it as a developer because it will go through quite a bit of development before we publish it. And the designer is, she seems like a wonderful person to work with. She's already, with the ideas that I've given to her, she's pushed back on some of them in a really good way, like a constructive way, and others she's kind of seen that they might be an improvement for the game. So I'm just really excited to work on that. And the other things that we have in the pipeline right now are things that you probably already know about, like the Between Two Cities expansion, the Euphoria expansion still in the works. And I don't think there's any viticulture stuff coming up.
That sounds like enough to keep you busy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so when is the unnamed bird game designed by a mysterious person coming out or could come out, I guess?
I would say based on the development that it needs, it'll probably be 2018. And so it'll probably go Charterstone, that game. But I'm also working on a cooperative game that might go in between if it's ready.
Wait, I cracked the code. I figured it out. Okay. All right. Yeah. So it's a bird game. Falcon, Millennium Falcon. You guys picked up the rights to Star Wars and you just didn't want to tell me about it earlier. I get it. Okay. Got it. I'm picking up what you're laying down, Jamey.
Wasn't Millennium Blades one of your favorites for the year?
It was. It's a stellar game, and it was on your top 10 as well.
Yeah, that's one that probably would have been higher if I had played it more, but I don't own it, but I need to play it more. The setup is so daunting to that game. That's the one reason I don't think I could get to the table all that often. But have you gotten to play it a lot?
I've gotten to play it enough, and it certainly helps that level 99 is here in Albuquerque.
Oh, okay, nice.
So but you're right. That game has a ridiculous number of cards, in a good way.
The same big stack from game to game, and then every once in a while you break it down, or do you separate it every cleanup and every setup?
Every cleanup and setup broken down. Oh, yeah, it's a bear, but that's it's kind of necessary for that game in a way because you have so many of these different expansions that you're rotating in and out, and I don't know, it just succeeded for me thematically. So, all right, Jamey, I'm gonna have one last question for you. It's my favorite last question of all time. I have yet to get a bad answer to it, so don't be the first.
No pressure.
All right. If you could be any flavor of ice cream, what flavor would you be and why?
Ooh, this is actually very much on my mind recently.
That specific thought?
Well, not that specific.
Or ice cream.
Whenever I go home to Virginia, there's an ice creamery called Gelati Celeste in Richmond, Virginia, that I think is the best ice cream in the world. And so every time I'm home, which is usually twice a year, I go into this store and I order 12 quarts of ice cream.
Oh, man.
I put it in a cooler, I buy dry ice, and I drive it back home. So right now in my freezer, I give a few to friends. I think I have 10 quarts in my freezer right now of what I think is the best ice cream in the world. So it's been on my mind. My favorite flavor there is a flavor called Chocolate Decadence. And while I would not want that as a nickname per se, I would, or a name. I don't see people calling me Chocolate Decadence. That is the flavor I would love to embody.
Okay, got it. Because of just the high level of quality.
High level, yeah, and it's just delicious.
Don't turn it back around on me. I don't actually have a good answer for that one. I just ask it all the time. I think mint chocolate chip because it still has. It still has something solid to it, but it also has this cool lightness and freshness, and it's just a cool flavor. It's always been a cool flavor to me, and I want to embody mint chocolate chip. That's my answer. All right, Jamey, that's all I had as far as questions. If folks want to reach out to you for whatever reason, disgruntled customers, happy customers, customers who are ambivalent, take your pick, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can find my website, Twitter, Facebook, all those things at stonemeiergames.com. The website is also found at kickstarterlessons.com, which maybe is a little easier to spell for people who just want the Kickstarter stuff, kickstarterlessons.com.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thanks for the time, Jamey.
Thank you so much, Alex. Great talking to you.
Once again, big thanks to Jamey. Again, big apologies to both Jamey and Alex, and apologies to all of you guys out there for delaying this awesome content. I will make sure that this doesn't happen again, and all of Alex's hard work gets shared with you guys. So once again, thank you very much for listening. Till next time, this is Sean.